Hi guys, so this video is aimed at all the coaches out there and all the athletes that self-coach, and I want to take a deep dive into a programming kind of concept that's come around recently and that's been really famous in the past like year or two, where you have a rep set before a single. And I've chosen the RPE 7 because that's just like kind of middle of the road RPE that a lot of people would usually train at for most of their training year. So that doesn't really matter. It just, the interpretation of this is you have a rep set that you push to some appreciable RPE and then you have a single. And this prescription is popularly known as a fatigued single. I want to take you guys into a deep dive where we kind of explore different reasons why, different scenarios where this can be prescribed, and what is the goal of prescribing this in each scenario, because it doesn't always have to be a fatigue single. It can be something else as well. So let's get into that. So the first reason to program a fatigue single is for prioritization. So sometimes in parts of our training year, it might be that the single just doesn't have a lot of priority in training, but you can still have to have it in there because you need to have that top end exposure for all your training to pop, and that's just what you need. So this is an easy way for you to prioritize the rep set before doing the single, because a lot of people have an adrenaline dump after doing a single, where after the single their brain is just like they're just fried because they put so much emphasis in the single that this takes a bit of a hit. So we can then to combat that, we can then put the rep set first. That just has you prioritize it over the single. So this is just the first reason why you might do something like this. The second reason is one that's very kind of interesting to me, and it is for the purpose of priming. So if the single is something that we want to prioritize in training and it's important, but we see that this usually happens when the day spacing is not as desired. You have, for example, the optimal day spacing between, let's say, like 2 deadlift days is 3 days. So you deadlift on a Tuesday and then you deadlift on a Friday, and that makes the Friday session feel really strong. Sometimes it might just be that you can't train on Friday because you work long hours on Friday or something like that. So you then have to deadlift on Saturday because of just life demands, right? So something like doing a rep set before your single can help you prime your technique for the single and then allow us to bridge that gap where the optimal day spacing might have been like 3 days, but we get away with doing 4 days because we've put this extra exposure before the single that just makes it pop a bit more. So we are essentially priming the single with a rep set. Okay, so this is where the single is no longer a fatigue single. It's actually a primed single. So this is where the terminology is a bit misleading, because recently I had a lifter that throughout his whole deadlift prep, we were doing singles after a rep set of 5, and that made the single pop the most. As soon as we took the rep set out, the single would fall flat and he wouldn't have the same kind of technique going into the single as he would if he did the single after the rep set. So it's a really good tool to kind of bridge gaps when it comes to stimulus and kind of link days to one another, right? And it can also be a tool where to improve the technical kind of proficiency of the single by adding some variation to this rep set to allow for a bit more, like put the athlete in a position that makes them execute the way that you want them to. For example, if someone has issues with their lockout and they just rush their lockout, and you want to prescribe like a high paused sumo deadlift to then kind of work on their lockout and kind of clean it up a bit, this set can be a set of like high pause sumo deadlift before their single to kind of prime that technique going into the single, and then their single just like goes really well compared to if you were to just do the single as is. So it can be like something that you use for technique priming as well. So just knowing these things will help you be a bit more creative with your programming, right? So third and fourth points kind of go hand in hand. So the third point is mimicking meet day fatigue. So a lot of lifters fall flat when it comes to deadlifts because they have squats before that, and they're just like fried from squats. Their back and legs can't really push to their maximum capacity on deadlifts, right? So instead of doing like an SBD day to kind of take care of that, you can also do a fatigue single approach where you push the lifter hard before the single with a rep set or maybe even 2 rep sets that are ascending, and then the single, you have similar kind of circumstances as you would have on meet day because you have that extra fatigue going into that single. So that's also something that you can do as well. And the fourth point is pretty similar to the third point, is using the fatigue to then put pressure on the lifter when it comes to executing the single. A lot of lifters can execute really well under perfect scenarios, but as soon as there's some kind of unfavorable circumstances that are thrown at them, maybe they have to take faster warm-ups, or maybe the movement pattern is just not feeling that good on their day, or maybe they are a bit sore from the previous sessions, their like execution goes out the window. So this fatigue single approach, actually fatiguing the lifter before they hit the single, actually puts a bit more pressure on them to have their execution spot on, because or else they're going to fumble if they don't keep everything perfect, right, when it comes to their execution. So this is a good way to kind of just put pressure on the lifter to kind of execute again and again as well, and then just improve their execution as a whole. I hope this was a pretty helpful video for you guys, and I'll see you guys on the next one.